supposed to be here on behalf of. Oh. Okay.
Oh, okay.
You could
Yes. And do you see?
So, distinguished friends, is this on, Andoni? It's fine? And dear friends, sorry for the delay. We're trying to connect by Zoom with one of our panelists. But it is truly my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Maliotis Cultural Center at Hellenic College, Holy Cross School of Theology. My name is Father John Chrysafkis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Huffington Ecumenical Insitute on this campus. I'm very privileged to organize and coordinate this evening's panel discussion about the Christians of Palestine with my very dear, new, respected colleague, Reverend Laura Everett, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Council of Churches. We have with us the President of Hellenic College Holy Cross, Mr. George Cantonis, who's honoring us with his presence. We're also grateful for the esteemed presence among us of the Right Reverend Alan Gates, Bishop Diocesan of the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts. Thank you for coming. The Reverend Dr. Nicholas Kazarian, Ecumenical Officer of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese in America, who's representing the Primate, His Eminence Archbishop Elpidophoros. Is Father Thomas here? I think that's it. But I'm very, very grateful to have all of you with us this evening. Some of you from some distance, in fact. For over 2 months now, we've all been front seat witnesses of this horrific violence in Israel and Palestine. But the public information, the public discourse across the globe, perhaps especially here in the United States, has reduced the conflict to a binary world, a binary conflict of Jews and Muslims. And so in conversation with Reverend Laura, we felt that our event should highlight the fact that the place of conflict is also the historic home of Christians, whose history and experience is part and parcel of the region and its story. We felt we were obliged, in fact, maybe called, to do something in light of all that has happened and only continues, it seems, to escalate. Far too many seem to respond and react without understanding the nuances. And that includes religious leaders. It includes those in the pews. I recall the verse in Jeremiah that has come to my attention the last few weeks, where the prophet says, "If I go out into the field, there are those dying by the sword. And if I enter the city, there are those dying of hunger. Both the prophet and the priest go about their business. But alas, they have no knowledge of the land." So our objective this evening is to inform, to inspire our audience here in person, also through live stream on the YouTube channel of the Maliotis Center, and then subsequently we will have it recorded as well on our websites, to inform and inspire people about Palestinian and Arab Christians who deserve our love and support, as well as much broader visibility and recognition, precisely because theirs is a lesser known aspect of the military war, of the informational war, of the propaganda war. And the event is being live streamed. Our panelists include eminent speakers from diverse backgrounds, Dr. Maria Kouri, an educator and author who's joining us by Zoom from Greece when we can connect, and Mr. Matthew Bell, religion reporter for Public Radio International, Pastor Carrie Ballinger, who ministers at University Lutheran Church and Harvard University here in Cambridge, and Father Arakel Algelian, who serves at St. James Armenian Church in Watertown. All of them either currently live or have formerly lived in the Holy Land. So they bring a very unique perspective to the discussion. You have on your chairs and your hands their biographical notes, so we don't have to read them out to you. I'll ask the Reverend Laura to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Father John. Dear friends, as we begin tonight, it is worth naming that everything we do tonight, unfortunately, in the context of war and the existing and enduring trauma of recent years. And so part of our commitment, our pastoral commitment, our Christian commitment to one another is that we go gentle. Go gentle on yourselves. Go gentle with one another. We commit to speak only for ourselves, to speak only of our own experiences, to offer what our New Testament professors here, our scripture professors might call interpretive generosity. To make space for what the Holy Spirit is up to. And to cultivate a vision of peace that passes all understanding. To practice that ancient Christian practice of hope. So on your chair, you should have found two items. A prayer card created by the Massachusetts Council of Churches and the Huffington Center, and a letter from the church leaders in Jerusalem. A word about the letter. We offer this letter for our kin and the Christians in Palestine, listening to their voices. Not that we too might have a somber Christmas, but to hear their call. We remember that people who have gone through much pain and trauma, there's still a practice of celebrating. And so we acknowledge the deep pain of those killed, those held hostage, those living in fear, and those waiting for war to end. We rebuke the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and anti-Arab rhetoric and violence that has become far too familiar, and commit to again examining our own hearts, lives, and communities to see the log in our own eye first. And yet, we are not a people without hope. Hope is our discipline and our calling, and we are gathered together tonight, hopefully, as a sign of hope, to offer it to one another when we cannot hold it ourselves. So hear this from Father John and I Clearly Church. We are committed to holding a space of honesty and ecumenical charity with one another, and if that strays from the Christian commitments to dignity of all people as beloved children of God, those in this room and those beyond it, we will stop people from speaking, and we will return to silence. No one of us is owed one another's stories. It is a privilege to hear from one another. And we will trust that you, like our Blessed Mother, will ponder all of what you hear in your heart. Again, our profound gratitude to our panelists and to you who have come out of
Maria,
the cold
can you hear
to
me?
gather in the warmth of community.
Perfect. Perfect.
So our goals for this evening are twofold. That the Palestinian and Arab Christian community might feel seen, known, and loved. And secondly, that
Just
the wider
testing.
body of Christ
I think you're
might see, know, and love the Palestinian and Arab Christian community locally. And we trust that God is
will it
glorified
let you
in
turn
this.
on your camera?
Our evening will work like this. Father
Oh,
John and
it
I will
almost
ask
came
a
on.
few questions of our panelists,
Perfect.
and then we will open up the floor for a moderated discussion. We will not be taking questions from the live stream, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Father John.
So, Reverend Laura, I think we should start with questions after Maria's designated questions. We'll wait till she connects. And we'll start with your questions too, Matthew.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Matthew, as you all know, Matthew is a journalist who lives here in Boston, but has just returned from a reporting trip from Jerusalem. You can find his story up with PRI's The World. Matthew, you just returned, and you had a recent story up about the increasing violence in the West Bank. And that's a story that's pretty long for a radio segment at 10 minutes. As a journalist, how do you approach covering something as complicated as the war between Hamas and Israel in such a tight space? I'll confess, as a preacher, I want you to teach me how to be wise and brief. I know I can always be brief. I can't always be wise. How do you think as a journalist about being wise and brief at a moment when people feel such suspicion about the media, particularly as you're covering something as complex as this war?
Good question. I think to start, we think of this, and I think of it at our program as we're not going to tell the whole story in a 10-minute segment, even though that is like mini documentary duration in broadcast news. I work for a daily radio program called The World. Our show is 48 minutes when you take the content around all the stuff, the interstitial stuff. So often I'll do stories, they'll be 4, 5, 6 minutes. But in the big picture, we tell ourselves all the time that, our job is to get people at the center of the story on the air, bring their voices to the audience, and bring as many different voices from different places that we can, different angles to a story, and dive right into it, tell a good story in 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then we're going to do another one tomorrow. And over time,
The mic rotating or the camera rotating isn't working, so just you can just hold it up normally or like profile.
And, again, we're just, I think oftentimes
one more,
in our
like
business,
180
we can catch
around,
ourselves,
because you're upside down
someone
now.
says this, and that's one perspective. We have to show the other perspective, and we try
There
to
we
remind
go.
ourselves, maybe not. Maybe we just have to let this person give their
Perfect.
perspective and let
Thank you.
people hear for themselves. I think this story about the West Bank was a good example of how, I feel like as a reporter, I can start kind of going down a road or pulling a string. And it started off with a guy who a colleague of mine got in touch with, from a Bedouin family in the West Bank who was driven out of their homes. There was about 200 people that were sort of harassed over time, but things really came to a head after October 7th, where it got really, really nasty. And there were people showing up in sort of uniform, sort of not. It wasn't clear. Settlers, army, then the army came. And over a period of several days, it got really violent, and they felt their lives were in danger, and they moved. They had been there for 30 years. So this is a really important story, compelling story. I sat down with him. I spent time. I heard his story, and then I started thinking, okay, well, what else do I need to go with this story? Who else? What other perspective is? So I got in touch with one of the Israeli activists who was with this family, with this group of people, even during some of those confrontations, and I got in touch with him and interviewed him. I'm trying to remember who else I talked to. I talked to a rabbi who is an American-born rabbi, Eric Asherman is his name. He's quite active. You might have seen him. He's active on social media as well. And for years, he's really tried to go out and, like the other activists I talked to, kind of be there with Palestinians in the West Bank who are not citizens and don't have the same legal rights that Israelis do at these critical times. And their plan was to try to help these people be able to stay in their community, in the place where they lived. They're herders. So I talked to the rabbi, and then talked to, thought, well, we need an official voice here. What this is, the army was involved somehow, and I looked at other news reports and found out there were soldiers there. There actually was a soldier that was fired from after this incident because I didn't have any details about that, but I got a hold of the spokesperson for the IDF and interviewed him. And then I thought, well, I need to get some perspective from Israeli settlers as well. And I got the phone number of the person who apparently was one of the leaders in the nearby settlements that they seemed to be involved in harassing this guy's family. Tried to get in touch with them. They didn't get back in touch with me, so didn't have them in the story. But I did go out to a place where I knew I could meet Israeli settlers, Jewish settlers, in a different part of the West Bank. And I talked for a day, I walked around and talked to people, and I got perspectives that I thought, I asked them, but I kind of put to them, look, this is what happened, this is the story I'm reporting. Have you ever seen anything like this? What do you think about this sort of thing? And I got their perspective too. So the story kind of grew into a 10-minute thing. And I mean, that's just like a little bit of how we do it in the bigger picture, where, today we decided on the show that we hadn't heard about the hostage situation for a while. We've covered that here and there in the past 2 months, but there are 137 some odd people that are still being held in Gaza, and we thought, we haven't heard from these people, and they've got to be nervous, let's hear from one of them. So we got one of them on the air today. But another thing that comes to mind when you ask about how to go at it, I think about having a good staff. We have Arabic speakers, we have Hebrew speakers, we have, I had the chance to be there. I speak both Arabic and Hebrew very poorly, but I had the chance to live there for 3 years. So we have on our staff, luckily we have people that have some expertise, have some knowledge, some background, some language abilities, and that really helps. That really helps a lot.
Matthew, you've been a journalist now for 20 years. You lived in the region. You lived in Jerusalem. You've covered this for a very long time. I'm curious how you think about this conflict that goes back generations, but also in so many ways really gets broken into a Muslim-Christian binary. And why you as a journalist think that is the predominant frame of reference that this wildly complex world gets broken into.
I don't have like a perfect answer for that for sure, but I can say in my time there, with all the time I've spent reading about this place and living there and then going back over the years many times on work trips, is that I know enough now to know that there's so much that I don't know. It really is complicated, like where you're from in the old city. We were talking about the Armenian quarter. This is one corner of the holy city that has representatives of one tradition of Christianity, and you can walk a half a block down the street or 2 blocks down the street and run into another 6, 8, 10 denominations of just Christianity. And the Christians are this small minority in the Holy Land. What is it, 1 or 2%? Yeah. Often I find that too when you go and I wander into a story about such and such of Jewish life or Israeli life, and I find, oh, they're quite, that's kind of complicated too. There's lots of different types of people here and lots of different things going on. That's just what has struck me about how much I've learned is, yeah, how hard it is. And often I feel like that this is a place where things aren't what you think they are. That it's just not so simple. Oftentimes, I guess, yeah, the media now. Part of me is I feel like it's a golden age of the news media right now, and I have to admit there's just there's bad journalism. It's a time of social media. Social media can be a nightmare. It can be. I've seen since October 7th just downright fake things, fake made up things. There's bombast and demagoguery and vitriol, and then just like false stuff. However, to speak up for my profession, there are really good writers and broadcasters and reporters and people I know, like just driving over here tonight, listening to Daniel Estrin on NPR. This is a guy who's lived in Israel and spent time in the Palestinian territories for I think a dozen years or something. He speaks absolutely fantastic Arabic, fantastic Hebrew. He's someone, I've met journalists who go there, they do a stint, and they're like, I am out of here. This place is nuts. It's like, it's impossible. I want to go. And honestly, I have a different feeling about it. Even this last time I went with the war, it's very depressing. It's really just heartbreaking, but I still I felt like it's good to be back here. Daniel feels the same way. If you hear the story he did tonight, it's outstanding journalism. He'll take you into southern Gaza. Great stuff. I just was jotting down a list. I don't have to read it all, but I do think there's good stuff out there to read, to listen to pay attention to. There's a lot to learn. I feel like I just don't have enough time. There's so much I don't have enough time to consume it all. But I'm happy to share some of my favorites. I think my advice, like navigating the stories, the media landscape is, look for stuff that you think is good and see who wrote it, and then follow that person, or follow that outfit that's covering this stuff in a serious way. I do think there's great stuff out there. Yeah, but the main question, how do people get it wrong? I guess sometimes I just think I don't want to pay attention to the bad journalism. There's bad stuff out there, and I just want to skip past it and go to the good stuff.
I think somewhere in that intellectual humility and uplift of the good work, we commend to you all Matthew's work and the work of PRI and the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew.
So I think we have a connection. Hang on.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear more from you, but thank you. So we have Maria. Do we have visual as well? Maria, can you hear us?
Hello, I can hear you, and thank you.
Okay, we're going to try and see. Can we see you, or you're avoiding this?
I have my video. You can't see me, Father?
Hang on. Give me a second. I think we're working on it.
Yay!
Oh, there you are. Thank you.
You're supposed to see the light of Christ in me, and that takes no visual image.
Well, we're seeing you now. Welcome. It's great to have you. I know that it's 2 a.m. for you, and I know that doesn't mean too much to you because you're up all night worrying and wondering about your family and your friends in Palestine. And so we're with you in prayer, thinking about your husband who is still there. But I did want to have you share with us a little bit about what it was like. You were there when, Hamas started the invasion. Israel retaliated with the bombing in Gaza. What was it like? I know you were there and then left reluctantly to go to Greece and care for your children, but what did it feel like to be there?
Well, Father John, before I start talking, I just wanted to say, can Matthew say everything he said in Greek to my Greek cousins that there's false news out there because apparently they don't believe me. But first of all, I just wanted to say, because some people might not know me, where I am when sometimes it's very violent. I am in the only Christian village that exists in Palestine. I'm in Taiba, which is biblical Ephraim. This is a half hour outside of Jerusalem, 10 minutes up from the Mount of Temptation in Jericho, where Jesus prayed to say no to the evil one. So we are 900 meters above sea level. From my kitchen window, I see the lights, their side of the Dead Sea. In the daytime, you can actually see the sparkle on the Dead Sea. And then from the 4th century ruins of St. George, which is the first church St. Helen built in our area, the same time she built the church in Bethlehem and the churches in Jerusalem, I can look down and see the Jordan Valley, where St. Mary of Egypt spent more than 47 years of her life. So just to let you know that I am 900 meters above sea level, and it's a very beautiful site, half hour from Jerusalem. We pray for peace and stability so people can continue to come to this ancient place. We go 5,000 years back, even before Jesus came into our village. We are known as Ephraim in the Gospel of John 11, verse 54, where Jesus, after he raised Lazarus from the dead, they wanted to punish him. So he came to an area like Ephraim. And the first people there, whether they were Jew, Gentile, Greek, Roman, they converted and they took on Christ and they were baptized onto Christ. So this village has stayed Christian from the time of Christ for 2,000 years. But in the 12th century, when Salah ad-Din, the Islamic leader, conquered the area, the local Christians, always following the gospel of love your neighbor, love yourself, as you love yourself, love your neighbor, love your enemy, excuse me. They fed the horses of the invading army and they fed the soldiers. So Salah ad-Din made a comment, why do they call you Ephraim? You are Taibin. In Arabic, Taiba means good, pleasant, or delicious. And that's why my husband, born in Taiba, in this very ancient village, going 5,000 years, as I said, even before the birth of Christ, very proud to be from this location. So he thought to name our product that we make there, we make beer for a living, he thought to name it Taiba, the village, and because it means delicious or good. But what really stands in my mind is actually when, first of all, I couldn't believe that with all the high intelligence and the biggest army in the world, and that over 1,000 Hamas people would get inside, Hamas militants would get inside Israel, but no one liked my conspiracy theory that someone on the other side let them in, so we'll just let that go for a while. But after the war on Gaza started, it didn't really surprise me because we've gone through 5 wars on Gaza, and usually it's like, we're going to scratch you a little bit, but then those guys are going to come and they're going to really just smash you to death. So, but right now, however, after 67 days of war and after over 18,000 people killed, and most of them are just little kids, 7,729 little kids to be exact, and 5,153 women, mothers, the whole world
I thank all the people all over the world. I thank the people in London, in New York, in DC. This is the hope now that I see is people loving humanity and standing up and saying, stop the killing. So, okay, I hope this stops since 2 million people are in the street, no food, no water. And I'm like, now I'm thinking every Palestinian all over the world, because I'm Greek, you know, by birth. I was born in Tripoli, Greece here, not Tripoli, Lebanon, not Tripoli, Libya, like the soldiers think at the checkpoint. I say, hello, Tripoli, Greece, but like, you know, we gave democracy to the world, which you're not practicing. But anyway, Tripoli, Greece, but met my husband there at Helena College, where you are all at right now. That's how a Greek meets a Palestinian. What stands on my mind is October 19th, when my son walked in and he said, Mom, they bombed the church. I said, no, that's false news. That's fake news. There's no way they're going to bomb the church. And I really can't believe it, actually, that Israel has bombed schools, mosques, churches, hospitals. Always, I used to go all over America with my book. Christina goes to the Holy Land doing book signings. So I used to always say this, Israel is above all laws, but wow, am I like experiencing it right now? Israel is above all laws, because the whole world is saying, cease fire. And America is saying, go, get them, go. Just like I used to say at East High School when I was a wrestler for the wrestling team. Forgive me, Father John. I hope you're still listening, and I need to stop because maybe I talk too much, but that's why I give free tours, because I talk too much. And on top of all that, they can't fire me because I'm family.
You're doing a really good job of controlling your hands and arms. Okay? So you're very successful. You should know that. So how do you think, Maria, just give us a couple of insights, again, from your experience. How should, not just people in general, how should Christians abroad understand what's going on in Palestine today?
Father John, it's so difficult for Christians abroad to understand what's going on in Palestine, because Christians abroad get in their car and they get to their church in peace, with freedom of movement, no trouble, no checkpoints, no permits. So first of all, they can't understand what we live like, and they don't even know what a checkpoint is. They don't know what a permit means. They don't know what it's like for people from all over the world to go into Jerusalem, which is the most sacred city in the world for Christians, to light a candle in the life-giving tomb of Christ, where the holy fire, the light of Christ on Holy Saturday appears to say Christ is our salvation. So people all over the world can go freely venerate, but if you're a Palestinian and you're Christian, and whether you're Palestinian, Muslim, or Christian, you're 10 minutes away, you cannot access Jerusalem unless you have a permit. And the permit is given to you by the DCO, the District Coordinating Office. And I just can't tell you the humiliation and I can't tell you what it's like not to have freedom of movement, because you have freedom of movement. And then, of course, you have access to water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So how can Christians know what it's like to be on the ground under frustrating situations where you might turn on your faucet and there's no drop of water to put on your toothbrush, because we live in a place where in the West Bank, everything is controlled by Israel. And so we are last in priority to get water, because there's hundreds of settlements all around us, and they have first priority. We're last class citizens. So they get water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have 5 days the water is turned off. It's Palestinian water, by the way, from An Samia, the local spring water. But as I said, we're last in priority to get it. So 5 days a week, no water. So Christians abroad, no, they can't understand what life is like on the ground, because for 75 years, Palestinians are being slaughtered, and no basic freedom, displaced, thrown in jail, confiscations, home demolitions, collective punishment, and October 7th, wow, Hamas militants did something, okay, very brutal. They wanted to kidnap people, take them back to Gaza. It turned into a very messy situation. But you don't know, on February 27th, which was, by the way, my son's birthday. So I was in Jericho. We were singing, dancing, having a great time. That's like what families do when you're like living 95% better than the rest of the population, only because you have food, a roof over your head, and a car to drive. That day, over 100 houses were burned in Hawara, over 50 cars from Israeli settlers attacking Palestinian village, Hawara. Who knows this? Do you know this? Of course not. You do not know 100 houses were burned February 27th, no, Hawara, but of course you know about October 7th because Hamas did that. And then 5 days before my son's wedding, my son was married in the 4th century ruins at the end of June. So we were praying for a peaceful day. We were praying for good weather. We were praying for a peaceful day because we had a very intense year of Israeli settler attacks all over the West Bank, more than ever, more than the 46 years I know my husband. 5 days before that, in Tur Mosaya, it's 20 minutes from me, again, Israeli settlers attacked the village. More than 100 houses burned, cars. The wedding that was taking place, was disturbed. It never took place, the wedding. Do you know this, Father? Of course not. No one in America knows this. And no one ever will, because Israel is supposed to be brought to you in your living rooms, the nice guy, the good guy, because as long as we are the bad guy, and as long as we're just those Palestinians, just like the local priest says here, they can go to Jordan, they can go to Syria, they got so many other. But do you know, we have amazing Palestinian artists. We have amazing Palestinian embroidery. We make an amazing first Palestinian boutique wine. We have an amazing Taiba olive oil, the finest in the Middle East. We have an amazing, and we are the first to make microbrew beer. We can make good things, but we've never had the freedom to. And just because we have never been free doesn't mean we don't deserve to be free, like my local priest here says. But, I try to manage to go to the Bible study because he's such a scholar and I'm learning so much. But, my politics and his politics are not sort of my type. I need to stop now. Didn't I talk more than my
Maria,
5
thank
minutes?
you. Thank you for putting a face to all these experiences and giving us your personal story. Weddings, you might pray for good weather here. You don't really pray for, no invasions. So thank you, Maria. I don't know if you can stay on, if you feel like, if you're, strong enough to stay up. There may be some questions at the end of the next two panelists. So in 15, 20 minutes, we could get back to you if you're still online, okay?
Promise to mute me, Father, because I'm going to be talking. Mute me so you don't hear me until it's my...
Can you mute? Thank you. All right, we'll get back to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Maria.
you very much.
I'm going to turn to you, Pastor Carey. Pastor Carey, these stories are familiar to you too. You were an American, a Protestant clergywoman, serving in the Old City of Jerusalem at Redeemer Lutheran Church for 8 years, which positioned you both as an insider and an outsider. Inside Old City walls, outside of the cultures in which you were ministering, and you had this unique role of bearing witness to much of what Dr. Corey shared. Visiting Palestinian villages, being with your parishioners, bearing witness to the lives of many of your parishioners and of other Palestinian Christians. What do you think American Christians need to know about Palestinian Christians that we don't?
First of all, I think that American Christians need to know that they exist. And part of my job as pastor of an international community in the Old City was to welcome thousands of visitors every year, mostly from churches, church groups that would come, and I was amazed at how many people had no idea that Palestinian Christians even exist. And in fact, many people would come to our congregation to worship and would come to the front door and say shalom, which is not a terrible thing to say. However, it's not the language of the people at the church, you know? And so I always found that part of my job was to, first of all, educate people just to know that Palestinian Christians are there. Secondly, I thought of this story, which I'm sure some of you have heard before, this adage that when Matthew was talking, that if you go to Palestine and Israel for 2 weeks, you go home and you want to write a book. And if you go for 3 months to volunteer, you come home and write an article. And if you stay longer than that, you have no idea what to say. And I feel that that's very true. People have said to me a lot, you know, you have so many stories from your time there, why don't you write a book? And the truth is, I don't know that that's really the best thing that I could do for the people there. Another thing that I want to share with now my congregation here, because now I'm back in the United States and I have all of this experience, at least, and stories to tell, is I want to squash some of the myths that people have. One of the things that people would come and say to me in Jerusalem was, Pastor Carey, we want to know, can you show us that place? And I'm sort of making up the story here, but it's like this. Can you take us to that magic coffee shop where Muslims and Christians and Jews all sit together and have hummus? Take us to that place. And I would say that doesn't exist. I mean, there's no magical place. Jerusalem is a magical place, but it is not a place where you can just come and make it all wrapped up tightly in a bow and it's beautiful and perfect. And so another thing that I think we need to do for American Christians is complicate things. Just make it complicated for them. So when they start to see it in a binary, this is a Jewish-Muslim war, to remind people that there is a diversity of people. Israelis are diverse. Palestinians are diverse. We'll hear more about that from Father, talking about the Armenian community, which we forget about as well. And whenever we start to think of it in the binary, we get in trouble. On the other hand, I heard from some of my Palestinian colleagues and friends, co-workers, that there is a binary. It's just not that it's Jewish and Muslim. It's Israeli and Arab. And one of my colleagues said to me, you know, the end of the gun doesn't know Muslim from Christian. The end of the gun just knows other. You're other than I am. And I always think about that. And so when I think about the situation for Palestinian Christians, who are, as has been said, only 1% to 2% of the population, they are experiencing the very same sorrows and griefs and persecution and oppression and occupation as Muslims. Exactly the same. And they, in my experience, I don't want to speak for people, but I'm relaying to you what I have heard from my friends. They see themselves as one people, as Palestinians first, and then as Christians or Muslim, and very much as neighbors and friends.
So Pastor Carey was one of the folks who I talked to early as war started to break out. And one of the gifts she offered me was a reminder of retaining humanity, which has been really hard to come by, as so much has moved towards demonization. And I think about that as we at Mass Council of Churches have been thinking about how do we... There's so much that can be said. What is helpful to say? And so I want to ask you, as you think about how you preach and teach in this moment, what has been so interesting to me about the experience, the situation is too mild, but I'm going to use it. The situation in Israel and Palestine is how many people see themselves reflected in this conflict. And I'm curious how you, as a preacher, approach this in your diverse American congregation and among Harvard students, which is its own curious, terminally unique tinderbox. But for this conflict, people find themselves within, whether that is within the movement for Black lives, for Indigenous rights, for gender equity. There is something about this. And so how do you, as a preacher, as an American, as a woman, as a Lutheran, give us grace, preach a 3-minute sermon to fit into Matthew's story, right? Like, no, I'm serious, right? Like, this is a complex thing. And so how do you think about telling the story to a diverse American congregation?
No pressure. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, no, we're good.
It is interesting because a lot of folks said to me that it must have been really challenging to preach the gospel in the midst of occupation, and I found it actually was easier than Jerusalem because it was very clear to me how God was speaking in that place and the things that needed to be said. It was very clear to me. And I think it's harder situated where I am in Harvard Square, and especially, I don't know if you've watched the news, but it's not been easy recently in Harvard Square, and figuring out, and again, I don't know that preaching the gospel is ever supposed to make us comfortable.
Come on, preacher.
Right? So trying to walk the line between where I'm not going to make anybody mad is never going to work. And you just have to speak the truth. One of the best ways to speak the truth as a preacher is to tell stories. Tell the stories of the people. And I have the great benefit of having 8 years of stories of people from the land where all of this is taking place and where it did take place, right? Christmas is a great time to bring home the message that God has come to us and is always coming to us, especially in the midst of conflict and occupation and oppression. I mean, it's not, I just read a poem the other day by Madeleine L'Engle, who says, God did not wait for the world to be perfect to come. I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but God did not wait for it all, for us to have it together. But God came exactly when we were a hot mess. And God came and was born among us. And I think the stories are important, helping people to see themselves in the other person. Again, just help them. I mean, I think of my good colleague, Munther Isaac, who's a pastor at Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. He recently, they decorated their church. I don't know if you've heard the news. Some of the news outlets have said Christmas is canceled. It's not canceled, by the way. That's just a good headline. But they have, I don't know if you did that headline, but I hope not.
I deleted that word a couple times.
Good. You deleted that. Good. Because it's not canceled.
We ended up with the headline.
Okay, well, it's not canceled. It's just that the heads of churches said, we are going to have a subdued Christmas because we are in mourning. But we still celebrate, and we still celebrate the power of joy over occupation and war. And so Pastor Munther, when they decorated their church at Christmas Lutheran, which is just by Manger Square, they put rubble there and a baby Jesus wrapped in a keffiyeh, and it was very powerful to see that if Jesus were coming today, if Christ were born today, he would be born in the midst of that rubble. And that's been a powerful image for people all over the world. Unfortunately, he and other leaders in Bethlehem wrote a letter to the White House asking for a ceasefire, and what they got in return was a veto at the UN. And Pastor Munther said, Actually, I wrote it down. They celebrate Christmas in their land and wage war in ours. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Our responsibility to tell the truth about that, as our siblings in Christ are just trying to have a little bit of Christmas joy this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to get you to work.
No worries.
While you're here. If it wasn't for Matthew, we could say an Orthodox, a Lutheran, and an Armenian sat on a panel.
We've got an Anglican.
So, Father Arakel, you were raised there, and you still have family there. Paint us a picture of the diversity of Christianity in that land.
Thank you for this opportunity. You know, people often, when they visit Jerusalem, they wonder and they ask the question, why there's an Armenian quarter. Often I ask, who are the Armenians? What is the Armenians? And so history tells us that there is no Christian history in Jerusalem without the Armenian participation. When Armenia became Christian in the year 301, and from the historic Armenia, there was no, Turkey didn't exist then, no Azerbaijan, no Turkey, obviously. So they went on a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, holy places, and many decided to stay there. And schools were built, monasteries were built, and then, you know, later history tells us the Crusaders came, Armenians were there, well established, and you know, they got along very well with the Crusaders and so on. So there, you know, Armenians are one of the, probably the most, I mean, you know, minorities really. Only several, 2,000-3,000 Armenians always been in Jerusalem. You know, during the genocide, you know, after the genocide, Armenians, you know, when they were massacred from their homeland, they went to, you know, Syria, Antioch, Lebanon, Egypt, and some came to Jerusalem. And, you know, they lived there and, you know, prosper and, you know, lived peacefully, whatever the circumstances were. So Armenians really did not participate in any conflict between Israelis and Arabs and Palestinians. They always remained neutral, just for their own safeties, for their own sake, really. They knew there are minorities there, so they didn't want to participate. But they were affected by any other people and Christians. There are Armenians call themselves, yes, Israelis, but also Palestinians as well. And some of them are, you know, in one of them, some of them are my parishioners, actually. So, you know, we're talking about Palestinian suffering and so on, growing up there and still exist. Maybe it's even more now. There is Christian harassment, persecution. Some of you might have known. There exists as we speak today. You know, like I said, Armenian presence goes to Jerusalem to, you know, early 4th centuries, and lived in the same locations in the old city Armenian quarters. And because of the situation has, you know, taken to this point, the settlers, right? We've talked a few times, it was mentioned today. They've taken the opportunity to harass Christians, especially the Armenians. there's particular land, we were talking earlier about it. They try to take by force. A few weeks ago, settlers came with machine guns, with trained dogs, to attack local Armenians, to have them to leave the specific property owned by the Armenian Patriarchate of Jerusalem. And they did not. They have tents there now. The local people, they're determined to protect their lands, their homelands. And so, like I said, I grew up there as a student. I have seen also. The Christians, the priests are spitted upon, nuns are spitted upon. So imagine this. Like we're saying, like why there is no security for Christians in Jerusalem, right? Many Christians in this country, in Europe, they support Israel, right? Well, I don't think they're aware what happens. The local Christian minorities go through, and it's not right. Right? So I have experienced, some of you have experienced, settlers, Hasidic Jews, they come in front of the entrance of the Patriarchate. They start praying there. And people are saying, like, why they're here? Go to your own holy places. Go to the Western world. And, they do it purposely, obviously. They try to claim that, this is not Armenian place, this is theirs. So there's always harassment, little fight takes place, and settlers, they come prepared. They know what's going to happen. They come with pepper spray, that's right, we've seen on videos. And they go to the police, and they don't do much, unfortunately. And so it's a reality. Yes, the existence of this harassment for Palestinians exists, but also let us be aware Christians are being harassed as well. And what can we do? I don't know really what can we do, but something could be done here from this country when a support is given to Israel, right? This has to be mentioned, brought up to the government that, Christians, right now, Christianity is the minority in Israel, in Palestine, basically. Used to be, not, but it is. It's a minority, and it's diminishing. It's diminishing. It's affecting the Armenians. It's affecting the Palestinians, the Greek Orthodox there, the Catholics. Armenians, we have the privilege, with the Greek Orthodox, the Catholic, Roman Catholic, are the three major denominations that have the privilege to, as a custodian, caretakers of holy places. Obviously, there are more Christians, have opportunity to come and celebrate, Christianity together. What happened recently, and some of you are aware of, to all my own people, right? In Azerbaijan, Armenians were stressed and persecuted. Genocide was taking place. We always say, never again, never again. Jewish people say, never again, never again. But look at, people, they ask, how is this possible for people who've been oppressed, seen Holocaust, and they, perpetrate, again, I don't want to get into politics and so on. The Palestinians, people who live in Gaza, they have seen, atrocities as well. So it's a problem. It's a problem that, we ask, like, what can we do as Christians? We always have to be hopeful. But our country, we say America is the champion of democracy, champion of human rights. Well, yes, we see what's happening in Palestine. The world turned the other side when Armenian Christians were suffering. They were asked to completely deport from their homeland. They say, well, we have to leave. How could you force people to leave when their ancestral land has been there for centuries? If they don't ask the people, ask the monasteries, the churches that were built there. Who built those churches? Not the Muslims, not the Turks. Armenian Christians built 10th century monasteries. There was no Muslims there. But again, the world, what bothers me, the human values have been diminished. Killing has become just a simple thing. No value at all, unfortunately. And we have to protect the, life that's given to us by God. So I don't know what else.
Father, before we open up for questions, you mentioned the word hope. And I wonder, as a priest and as a preacher, just how you see the message of hope, the gospel of hope, in the midst of, in the reality, in the context of war and persecution and slaughter and evacuations and emigration. Where does the resurrection have the last word after the crucifixion?
Well, it's never easy. We've been here before. We've seen this situation before. Prayer is, our greatest hope. And Christ is our, hope that, he saw persecution. He was persecuted. He was crucified. And with his own resurrection, he gives us hope that life must go on and every life must be protected and preserved. And help the needy. Be there when there is persecution. No matter how bad it is, we have to reach out, have to help, and bring the light of Christ, the gospel, to those who are in need. And there is no other way to do it. Love your enemies. It's not easy. It's not easy. But, Christ also tells us, you cannot do it without him. So we need Christ to be by our side, to lead us, to strengthen us, and he is our hope. He is the only hope, really.
Thank you. Thank you, Father. So I'm very grateful that panelists have been so compassionate. And as we open up now for questions that will be moderated by Reverend Laura and responded to by our panelists and possibly also by Maria if she's still on, I would like to ask that we also be respectful and considerate in the way we ask questions and what questions we ask. I am convinced that there must be a way to feel the pain of one community without denying it in another. That must be a precondition for basic peace in the world. So I welcome you to come to the middle of the seating here where I'll have a microphone and look forward to fielding your questions.
So this is how we'll receive questions. We want to hear your name, where you come from, and what your question is and to whom you are addressing it. And I remind you that questions end with a question mark.
That's very smart.
Pastor.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Reverend Daryl Hamilton. So I pastor with my colleague, Ashley Weasley, at the First Baptist Church, Jamaica Plain. A couple of things came up in the conversation. It was a rich one. Thank you for having it, and thank you for having us here. I heard the doctor name that a lot of Christians around the world don't understand the experiences of Palestinians. And I want to disagree slightly because there is a section of Christians that do understand, and they look like me. Right? And so I don't need to clap for that, but it's just the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of similarity and symmetry in our struggles. I was blessed to be able to go to the Holy Land for the first time earlier this year and be in the Armenian Quarter and meet Palestinian Christians and, yes, learn that they existed for the first time, right? But the reason why I say that is what the question mark is, how can we work together to better amplify your existence, your voices? You know, me as a Black Christian Baptist, part of that tradition of protest, prophetic work, and the legacy of not only Dr. King, but, you know, Malcolm and all these other people we like to lift up. You know, there's important work that I believe we can do together. So that's my question, is how can we work together? How can we support one another to continue to amplify your voices, continue to bring attention to your struggle and your plight, and then also bring more people along in this work together with one another? That's my question. Was it a big, okay, they have them, okay, all right.
Thank you, friend. Is Dr. Corey on the stream still? Sounds like...
I'm still here. Of course, I will not go anywhere unless the electricity goes out.
Oh, we will pray for the lights to stay on. Do you want to respond to this?
Which, by the way, happens in Athens. Like, it's not, I'm so sorry. I didn't think the question was for me, so I need like 3 words to answer. What can Christians do in America to connect to us?
Christians broadly, Black Christians specifically.
Christians broadly and Black Christians in America specifically.
I actually know what every human being across the world can do, Christian or not Christian, and that is support with your presence. Come, walk the footsteps of Christ. If you're not religious and you're not walking the footsteps of Christ, come and walk history in one of the most ancient places, because we go back 5,000 years even before Jesus is born, and in Tibet, even if you're religious, we connect to you because Jesus came on his last stop. So if it was beautiful for Jesus as a retreat, it's going to be beautiful for every human being across the world. But even if you're not religious, we have more than 30,000 olive trees. You can enjoy a beautiful hike on Abraham's path, and you can see with your own eyes, and don't just visit buildings and churches, but visit the living stone. So every Christian, every human being across the world can support, God willing, if there's peace and stability, because it has to be safe for people to come, stay at the Taiba Golden Hotel and the other 100 hotels in Bethlehem, and support with your presence, just like it says. Come and see, like it says in the Gospels, come and see.
Can I respond to Pastor?
Please.
Pastor, thank you for your comments. I was just going to...
It was a question.
It was a question. And comments in between there. I wanted to say I'm so grateful to know that you were able to go. And that goes along with what Dr. Houri said, that you were able to be there. And also, I think that you have a really special opportunity to be able to counteract some of the narratives that have come out of the Black church that I have understood, some of the history of, for very good reasons, identifying with the Exodus narrative, for example, and until people come and see, they don't really understand what that situation actually is today and how it connects with the experience that you were naming. And so I think that you have a really important thing that you can do, which is to share those stories and to help people to see those connections. And I wanted to say that we, the Lutheran Church and Middle East Council of Churches actually brought a group of black church leaders in, I think it was 2018, 2019. In fact, now Senator Raphael Warnock was on that trip. And it was, I feel very proud. Once I saw that, this was before he was running and everything, I thought, oh, good, he's seen what's happening, and now maybe he can be a messenger in our politics. So I just wanted to affirm you that you went, and I can't speak for how you can do, work together with Palestinians necessarily now, but I know there will be people that will be interested to work with you.
And we'll encourage folks to connect with Pastor, who I know is doing some community organizing as well. If you want to have further conversation, would that be welcome? Yes. Great. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm not a pastor. I'm just a regular person, but I've been to the West Bank twice, and so I have a sense of what life is like over there. My question is, how can we make sure that more churches are talking about this? I've been on the hunt since October 7th. I've yet to find a church. I've seen one church that will say the word Gaza. That's it. People are not talking about it. So how can we encourage bravery? And I get it's not easy, right? We see the news every day. We understand that words are twisted and concepts are inverted. It's like up is down and down is up. That's how I feel like I'm living these days, especially having been there and seen the reality, and just having friends there. We all know. How can we stop the madness and talk about what's really going on and what our country is doing and what our president is complicit in? And as Christians, we should all be called to do something about this, right? So how do we get there?
Thank you. Lauren?
Yes.
Yeah, Lauren. So I'm going to tip this to Matthew and ask you to think.
The non-clergy.
And here's why. Because I know you were trying to figure out how to do this at the church where you're a local member, right?
So yeah, I was going to say.
Which was super awkward, as I remember, and we had a phone call about this, not to divulge pastoral confidences, right? But how we do this in our local congregation is really tough.
I think it's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, to give Grace Church in Medford a plug, we've got an event. I think it's next Tuesday. Let me double check and make sure that's the day. But there's a Islamic center in Medford that we have connection with. That they're going to come. There's a synagogue in Medford as well. The new rabbi there is going to come on Tuesday. I think the plan is. I wasn't involved in helping to put this together, but I do know that it's tough. We all know this is really tough. And I mean, about the thing about being connected to there, I'm always amazed at how many Boston connections I find with the Holy Land. The reason I go really to Grace Church in Medford is because I ended up going to St. George's near the old city, and I made this connection to the Episcopal Church and ended up going to Episcopal Church for the past 10 years in Medford. But I'm amazed at how there are maybe more local connections, I think, with a place like Boston than a lot of people realize. The only thing I know about the interfaith gathering we're going to have next week, really, and that is that my rector, Carol Moorhead is her name, told me that she really wanted to focus on let's pray about this. We're not going to have a lecture or debate, or we're going to get together because people from these different places with different faith backgrounds, different views, obviously, even in the same faith background, if we had different views, and we know I get into arguments with family members about this stuff, but praying about it is something that seems it can work and people can come together. Hopefully it works and goes well.
I may add also, definitely local get-together and so on, but excuse me, my suggestion will be definitely organize trips to go to Jerusalem. I have done that many, many times. I have some parishioners here that have been to Jerusalem, you to Armenia, you to Jerusalem, I've been, for 8, 9 times now. I think it definitely adds and changes the understanding of what's going in Jerusalem. And of course, seeing holy places and so on. People have transformed, they've changed, and they want to go back. They want to go back, it's a beautiful experience, life-changing experience.
And include Taiba, Father, because TripAdvisor says it's highlight of people's sorry.
So basically, anybody in the room who's going to Taipei after this, can we all raise our hands? Who's going to Taipei?
And I am volunteering my family for a free Taiba beer tour and a free sample.
Thank you, Dr. Correa. Thank you.
So my name is Tava Regal. I'm local here, although I am also a graduate of this school. I have 2 questions. One for Matthew. You've been to the Holy Land many times, and my question is, how have you seen kind of the, on the ground, the feeling between the communities changed throughout the course of your travels there, from perhaps 10 or 15 years ago towards today? That's my first question. The second question is directed more broadly at the panel. How does the Christian community, or how can the Christian community in the Middle East speak to the evangelical Christian community in the United States that is incredibly pro-Israel, mostly because of their theological presupposition that they are kind of forcing the end times. And so they have this sort of theological underpinning, which actually then affects and drives their politics. So how can that kind of be bridged? So those are my 2 questions.
Thank you, Doctor.
On the communities working together, interacting, I think it's gotten harder. When I was living there, my wife and I sent our kids to 2 schools, a preschool and pre-K and kindergarten, and actually one school goes all the way up to 12th grade. And there are 2 places in Jerusalem that are very few places where actually Arabs and Jews kids go to school together. It's bilingual in Hebrew and Arabic. And great experience. It was a great school. We miss the school still because it was such a great experience. But in a place like Jerusalem, having kids go to school together, having a school community, it's really difficult. And it was challenging when I was there 2010 to 2013. In more recent years, that school has been vandalized. They're still doing it. They're still open. But I popped my head into the YMCA in Jerusalem, is where the preschool is, daycare and preschool, and introduced myself to the new principal there, and he told me, it's tough. It's really difficult. And there's just a lot of extremism. There's a lot of political extremism. There's a lot of this stuff just gets whipped up and creates an environment where I think, in some ways we get, as part of the so-called liberal media, I guess I'm part of it too, but we go to these examples of where people are doing stuff together and it shows like rising above, and those are great stories, but I guess sometimes you might get the false impression that, oh, that's great, people are all doing it. This is really hard to do. It's like just to make it happen, to kind of get over all the practical and political, financial, all the stuff, to work together. And yeah, that's one of the things about this war that I think is really daunting to think about. It just makes everything so much worse. Obviously the human suffering and devastation is just mind-boggling. But to look at like the road ahead of people working it out, I don't know. It's so challenging.
Sure. There's a little hope, as we speak. A few days ago, there were Jewish group, I think they're minorities probably, they came and they met with the local Armenian community, young people. They're not even the leaders, but just to show them support that, not every Jewish and whoever lives in the area are against, Christians and so on. So it was good to see that, actually. It was good to see, local Jewish people, they come and support the local people that they're with their struggle and so on. So.
Do you want to say that?
So we have 4 people that want to ask questions, I think, 3 or 4. I'll ask that you be brief in the questions. So skip the comments and straight to the question mark. And the panelists perhaps also being brief, because we're pretty much at the end of our time. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Maria Khoury, this is for you, this question. I'm Andres Duran. I'm a seminarian of the Palestinian Jordanian Vicariate, ethnically Palestinian from my mom's side. I'm in Jifna, so probably not too far away.
You in Jifna?
Yeah, I'm in Jifna, Dar Awad.
Wow. God bless you to be in such a holy place where I thought it's paradise. So enjoy being on the holy hill.
Thank you. And of course, I could make so many comments, especially about our people. But we have to get straight to the question. So my question kind of goes to how do we speak to the youth, especially within our people, our vicariate, the Palestinian youth, growing up, especially no one can understand what it is to be a Palestinian. I mean, how can you? Especially being a Palestinian, in our case, Orthodox Christian, how do we speak to the youth? How do we let them understand their identity that has been tarnished and been taken away, not only our culture, our land, our heritage, but even the lives of those we know and love? How do we, and this is, as we speak, this continues on, how do we speak to our youth and how can we do that? That's my question. Thank you.
We should not do what the Americans do, sports, food, money, pizza. I think we should do what Elder Ephraim did. Build a monastery in Jifna or Taiba and invite the youth one by one, slowly. I think the monastery is the answer because I don't think, the food and the partying, it works. It works in America, but I think it proves that Elder Ephraim building the monasteries in America, over 19 Orthodox monasteries, shocked the Orthodox bishops in the world. So I'm with you to build the monastery in honor of St. Constantine and Helen. Help me out, I help you.
Sounds good. That's awesome.
Oh, sorry, and by the way, I'd like to answer the previous question about the evangelical Christians, and I like to volunteer my family, although females don't have very much rights in the Middle East. It's a man's world, very male-dominant world. I'd like to volunteer the space of Taiba and the Taiba Golden Hotel for top Orthodox Lutheran theologians from all over the world to come and to invite top evangelical theologians and to discuss this issue that's misinterpreted, because actually my professor, God rest his soul, Father Stanley Heracus, who edited all of my books, I'm very blessed, all 10 books, he taught me that in order for Jesus to return again, there's nothing that I have to do other than to be alert, be prepared, but nothing says that Israel on the ground with the gunships and the Havachika, all this equipment from America is the Israel of my Gospels. He taught me we are the Israel of my Gospels. We were baptized unto Christ. We accepted the Messiah. We are born unto Christ. We are the new Israel that we sing in the Gospels, because my Palestinian friends, my family, the youth in Palestine, when they say the word Israel in the Gospel, they don't feel comfortable because they're thinking of that Israel, the soldiers, the gun, the one that puts the gun in my son's head when he's 10 years old and I'm in the car and I want to go to the Ramallah French school and I told him, please, can you just put the gun down? You might breathe and you might shoot my son. I'm a mom. I want to take my children to school. When he says it's a military zone, you can't go. And I've been driving for 2 hours, and this is 2001. And I just want to get to school, a 10-minute ride that's made into a nightmare by the Israeli settlers that you don't know about. Sorry, but I meant to say, what was I saying?
Please. Okay. Yes. I'll be real quick. Sorry. Anthony Barsamian. I'm involved here in Boston with a bunch of organizations. A quick question, Matthew, this is primarily for you. So 3 weeks ago, I went to a DNC fundraiser, and I walk in, Palestinians, protesters, all over the place, outside, tons. I walk in, Kamala Harris, it's a fundraiser. First thing, I stand with Israel. First thing she says, I stand with Israel. And I looked around the room and I'm saying, a lot of these people, where are our people? Like, why aren't Orthodox? Why aren't Christians breaking through? I sent my message to the White House. They heard me loud and clear. It's not that I'm anti-Israel. I have plenty of, I understand both sides. But I feel sometimes praying is great, and I know we're churches, so that I get it.
Thank you,
But
Anthony.
it's time to get active. I mean, really. I mean, why do you see that no one in America really knows about Orthodox Christians? I mean, they know the nice Greek church once in a while, but why is it we're not breaking through? Why do you feel that Christians, Muslims, even the Jewish community who knows us, we sort of run under the radar screen? So why do you think, like, the Vice President of the United States can walk into a room with a luncheon, and the first thing she says is, I stand with X versus Y? I'd feel uncomfortable if she said, I stand with Armenia, honestly. I mean, that's not where I want to see my vice president, the first thing out of her, on her agenda. But anyway, that's my question.
Yeah.
Politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think in, a lot of the political debate and the news media can follow this, that things can just be broken down into such overly simplified binaries, and that foreign policy issues just become these sort of catchphrases, and it's almost like it's just so vapid often, and it's about a quick soundbite and message. And I don't know, I just myself, being a nerd and public radio nerd, I want to hear in-depth conversation. I want to hear people having debates about this stuff. I want to hear from people I disagree with. I want to hear from, I could talk about this stuff all day long, and I have lots of stuff to read about it. I want people to demand more depth and more serious discussion. Foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy is not a catchphrase and a slogan and a bumper sticker, and it's one thing like wandering around in a place like Jerusalem, you see when, the United States supports something, we have such weight, it's like this massive floodlight, and it just gets shined, and it's just unbelievable, the power of it, and then it just goes and shines somewhere else. And I want, as voters, people to take this stuff more seriously and to think about it and be informed and to ask good questions. And that's a great question. People should ask Kamala Harris about that. What does that mean?
Right. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you very much. We learned a lot. My name is George. I come from about 20 minutes from here, and I am an Antioch Orthodox Christian. And I don't mean to hammer the question, but the thing is, we see that the evangelical church is so vocal pro-Israel, and we know why. And the Dr. Maria said it about the coming of Jesus again and things like that. But why? And by the way, everything is based on God promising them the land. So that's very crucial for us. And why aren't the Christian, the head of the church, the hierarchy, why aren't as vocal as the evangelical church and say, because in our name, I mean, you go to you come from the East, to the point where there's a mislabel. I mean, Christian means kind of like, especially Western Christian, means you are with the evangelicals, if people do not know what's going on. So I think the church needs to be more vocal about this issue and clarify that these comments do not represent us. I mean, is it anti-Semitism that they're afraid of? I mean, it's now they're throwing this label all around for everything, whatever you say. So this is my question to the church, to the head of the church. Can we support you in any way, or what can we do for you to become more vocal? Thank you.
Well, some churches are speaking out about that, by the way. I mean, but the evangelical churches, when we use that term as a broad term, they have so much money, and to be frank, they give money to Israel, and Israel takes it, even though it's fundamentally anti-Semitic. What these churches are saying. It's fundamentally anti-Semitic because their theology is that they're going to try to get Jesus to come back sooner, but actually only 144,000 Jews are going to be saved, right? So at the end of the day, it's not pro-Israel or pro-Jewish. It's a political game that Israel is playing by receiving that money and giving them opportunities to come and do really ugly festivals, by the way, through the streets of Jerusalem. But there are churches that are pushing back against that, and there are some documentaries that could be shown in church. I'm trying to remember the exact name of the one. I think it's called Kingdom Come. And actually features my good friend Munter Isaac from Bethlehem and others. And it was actually an evangelical Christian who went to the Holy Land to interview Palestinian Christians and was completely shocked by what he found. He had no idea, what he found. And so I wish I had that exact thing for you. And there are many books out there. So one of the things we can do also is to educate our congregations. And if you find one of those books or you find it interesting, see if you can have a book study in your church, see if you can educate people on that.
So thank you. I would like us to thank our panelists. Your insights were just fascinating, and I'm very grateful to the three who are here in person, to Maria in Athens. The hands were moving more toward the end, Maria.
I'm sorry, Father, the hands were what?
Your hands were moving more towards the end.
I'm sorry, because I was saying, come to Cyprus, come to Cyprus.
Thank you, Maria, thank you.
The olive oil.
So I'll ask Reverend Laura to close the evening for us.
Dear friends, thank you. I think Father John and I can think about some next steps too, and keep an eye on both the website for the Huffington Ecumenical Center and the Mass Council of Churches, and on our social media, whether that's gathering links. We're not going to do this before Christmas.
Thank you.
You're not, Pastor Carrie Jo, you're not going to put it out before Christmas. Gathering some links, some of the documentaries, pointing you to Matthew's reporting and others, stories that will be coming through this. But, our commitment at the Mass Council of Churches is this is not a one-time conversation. We know that this war is going to go on. We know we need to gather again. I feel heartened to be together with you. I hope for our Palestinian and Arab parts of the body of Christ, you feel heartened that you are not alone tonight. I hope you hear this as a continuing commitment, that we hold one another. I went and visited with some of you at St. George's in West Roxbury. Hi. And I kept thinking about those words from the small Paraklesis service that we prayed in English and in Arabic. There are Christians who pray in Arabic. Mm-hmm. And we prayed, Most Holy Theotokos, save us, a shelter and protection, a wall unshaken become, O Virgin, for those of us who flee to thee, a shelter covered and a refuge and a place of joy. A refuge, a shelter, and a place of joy. Friends, may this be our hope and our promise for the Christians of Palestine and for all of us who watch and wait in this season of Advent. So I'd invite you to rise as you are willing and able, and with the prayer card that is before you, with Our Lady of Bethlehem on the front, And on this day, when many parts of the church are celebrating the feast of La Virgen of Guadalupe, too, we're going to pray all of the words in this prayer. Will you join with me? God of all peace and comfort, we recognize that we are each created in your image and likeness. Genesis 1. We acknowledge that we are each our neighbor's keeper. You remind us that sin lurks at our door, but we must resist it, inside us and around us. Grant to see our own faults and not to judge our own kin. We long for justice. Help us to turn from evil and do good, to seek peace and pursue it. For that is how we may become and be called children of God. Through the prayers of Saint Porphyrios of Gaza, in whose monastery so many Christians have sought shelter, we ask you, have mercy on us and save us. Amen. Go in peace.
It was so nice to meet you. I hope we'll see each other in Jerusalem someday.